Hello, ServeWellers. Over the last few weeks, we've reviewed the basics of Service Academy and ROTC programs. This week, I'd like to do a side-by-side comparison of the two options so you can start to appreciate the similarities and differences. As I've talked about many times before, these programs can be so competitive that it's often a good idea to pursue both of these options at the same time. Why don't we start with the similarities? I think the biggest similarity is the fact that once you graduate from both programs, you will begin working as a junior officer in the U.S. military, leading a group of soldiers or sailors or airmen or Marines for a minimum of 5 years. Some people call this 5-year period a service commitment or a payback period. I prefer to think of it as a guaranteed job. In both options, once you graduate, you will start at the same rank or the same title. For example, when you graduate from the Naval Academy or from a Navy ROTC program, you graduate as what we call an ensign, or the most junior officer rank in the U.S. Navy. Both options require a long application process, as you know, including interviews, fitness tests, medical reviews, extra essays, personal statements, letters of recommendation. And that's probably why you've enrolled in ServeWell Academy, because these tasks can become overwhelming and very difficult to organize. And I'm here to help you on that score as well. Both options deliver a world-class education. Both options provide extensive leadership training and prestige and name recognition. Both options offer world travel. Both options are very rigorous physically. They both require a baseline level of fitness. In both cases, students are paid a monthly stipend that they can use for books and some other expenses. And of course, both programs give you the option to remain in the military as a career at the end of your quote-unquote minimum commitment. So as you can see, there are a lot of similarities. There are some differences as well, and I'm going to break these differences down into a few different categories. We're going to look at lifestyle differences, academic differences, leadership differences, and some miscellaneous differences in diversity and pride and career prospects. Let's start with the lifestyle differences, which is probably the biggest difference. Service academies are more immersive, if you will, than ROTC programs. Because when you attend a service academy, you actually live on a military campus, which is self-contained, and everyone there has a common mission. There's a lot of structure. Students wear uniforms. Everything is neat and orderly in its place. You will see common military etiquette, like saluting and acknowledging people with yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It has a much more intense and a much more serious vibe than does an ROTC experience. Remember, as an ROTC candidate, you're attending a traditional college, like a Vanderbilt or Duke or UCLA or Harvard. In most cases, nobody on campus even knows that you're an ROTC student. Unless you happen to be in uniform, maybe that happens a couple times a week. The campus environment is typically much more laid back and less intense. You have students from all walks of life, wearing whatever clothes they want or don't want. They're playing frisbee on the quad. They're riding bikes and scooters. They're walking around barefoot. They're generally doing whatever they want. On a service academy campus, you will not find yourself doing such things. You will not be ordering hot wings and pizza to your dorm room at 3 a.m. for a study break. That typically doesn't happen. Service academies are more restrictive when it comes to free time or liberty and how you spend that free time. This is obviously a far cry from what can happen on the campuses of traditional colleges as an ROTC student. As an ROTC student, you pretty much look and feel and act like a regular old college student for maybe 80% of the time, which is why I sometimes say that the difference between a service academy and an ROTC is the difference between full-time military experience versus a part-time military experience while you're in college. Let's move on to academics. The service academies have a very structured approach to teaching and learning. There is not a lot of flexibility when it comes to what classes you're taking and when, especially in the beginning. Most students are on a similar academic trajectory until it's time for them to select their major preference. In other words, at a service academy, there are a lot of core or mandatory classes that must be taken by everyone, whether they want to or not. Most service academies put a high priority on STEM classes and majors. They have a mandate to teach technical skills that can be put to direct use right away in the field. ROTC students, on the other hand, typically have more flexibility when it comes to academics, and a lot of that is dictated by the college and the ROTC program on that particular campus. ROTC students do have to focus on their major that they selected in the ROTC application, but as long as they're tracking in that major, they can often take other classes that they want. And while there are no guarantees, sometimes there are opportunities to change majors after you get to college, but as I talked about before, I wouldn't count on that. In ROTC programs, while they are still focused on STEM, there are opportunities to major in something outside of STEM. For example, my sons went to Yale on Navy ROTC scholarships, and one is a history major and the other is an English major. It's more difficult to get an ROTC slot for these non-STEM majors because there are fewer of them, but it is possible. ROTC students will normally have to take additional military classes in addition to their traditional curriculum, which certainly can add extra work. Now let's talk about leadership. While it's hard to measure leadership per se, certainly the service academies have an edge when it comes to the exposure and raw number of leadership opportunities. After all, the students at the service academies are required to take leadership roles as they move up the ranks from first year to second year to third year to fourth year. They also get a lot of formal training and hands-on experience, and they get to observe how their classmates handle their leadership jobs, and then they can make adjustments on what they think works and what doesn't work. As an ROTC student, on the other hand, there just aren't as many formal opportunities to lead. There are opportunities within the ROTC unit, but just not as many. The ROTC students don't get together and spend as much time together as the service academy students do, so there are fewer leadership options. Of course, time permitting, ROTC students can take on leadership roles within the college campus itself, whether that's in intramural sports or speech and debate or within clubs or student groups, and I'm sure that that's recommended or encouraged by ROTC leadership. Most ROTC candidates will participate in what they call leadership labs, if you will, which try to provide more formalized leadership training, but it would be tough to compare a weekly leadership lab with the 24/7 leadership challenges at the service academies. And now, how about some miscellaneous differences that you'll find between these two options? Let's start out with diversity. Generally speaking, most people would agree that the student body on traditional college campuses is more diverse than at service academies, because traditional college campuses draw students with a wide variety of interests and orientations and backgrounds and aspirations and life experiences and ideologies. And while the service academies are diverse in some ways, they also tend to attract people with similar outlooks and backgrounds and personal goals. ROTC programs are held on campuses with more diverse geographic locations and sizes and, as I said, ideologies and climate and academic programs. Some ROTC programs are on campuses with 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 students, which is a much different experience than the relatively smaller service academies, which typically have about 5,000 students and sometimes even 1,000 students. All right, what about career prospects? I'm sure this is a subject for debate, but some service academy graduates feel that their more immersive or intense undergraduate experience creates stronger bonds among their peers and wider and better networking opportunities and potentially more upward mobility when it comes to advancement. After all, service academy graduates will simply know a lot more people in their respective branches than someone who didn't attend a service academy. And that may translate into better career prospects down the road. How about financial? If you attend a service academy, you pay $0 for your education because everyone is on a 100% full scholarship. As an ROTC student, on the other hand, it's not quite that simple. Some branches, like the Navy, pay tuition for up to 4 years. Others pay a portion of tuition. Others don't always pay for the full 4-year experience. It varies based on the branch and the applicant and the needs of the branch. Suffice it to say that both degrees make affording a college degree a lot easier, but they're not exactly the same. I hope this has been helpful. I will continue to highlight the similarities and differences in both paths in the coming weeks and months. Until next week, continue to study hard, play hard, and don't forget to serve others.